Welcome to The Brain Factor, hosted by myself, Joy Riddle, and Laura Hawley. We're a part of Meridian Behavioral Healthcare, where we believe that wellness is within everyone's reach. This podcast is a conversation about what research-based protective factors look like in real life. Our hope is that you'll walk away with something that you can use in your own life and have had some fun with us along the way. So let's get started.
Hi, and welcome to The Brain Factor. I'm Laura.
I'm Joy.
And we're going to talk today on the one about control, about one of my favorite topics, which is control, because I like to have it.
Yeah.
But I don't always find that I can. Yeah. And I think that's a common issue that does affect people's stress levels and coping and all of that stuff. So I want to kind of unpack that today. What are the things within our control? What are the things we can't control? How do we tell the difference? And I know you and I don't agree on everything on this topic. So
we don't agree on everything.
So let's dive in.
Okay. So what do you want to talk about? What's out of control or in control?
Okay. So let's start with the uncomfortable first. What are some of the things that we can't control?
Other people's behaviors or beliefs.
Yeah. I think that's the fundamental one that, like, when you ask anybody, like, what's in your control, what's out of your control, it's like, oh, I can control me and I can't control other people, right? So I think fundamentally we have a grasp on that, but when you start breaking that out, that starts to get more complicated than it seems at initial glance, right?
Yeah, totally.
When we have influence, where I guess that's what I'm trying to get to. What's the line in influence versus control? Because I can't control someone else's behavior, but like the way that I treat them, the choices that I make in my behavior can influence what I'm getting back.
Well, yeah, because I can also choose not to be around them.
Sure. So that's boundaries. That's something we do have control over, right? Is who's in my life and who's not.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I can choose. Yeah. Well, it's going to go back to boundaries again with other people.
Sure.
What you can talk to me about. There's been people in my life that have said, you know what, we're not going to have this conversation anymore.
Yeah.
These topics, like with a really good friend, these topics we decided were off limits between the two of us.
Yeah, that's not part of our friendship.
It was, we just can't talk about these things.
Yeah, I think having boundaries is probably the hardest thing. And I think that's one of the big things that we can control that does not feel like we can most of the time, right? Because there's a lot of other layers. We talked like last episode when we were talking about emotional clutter, that gets very cluttered emotionally. Like, I mean, I can technically, I'm capable of saying, I don't want you in my life, or this isn't healthy, or this is what I need. Yeah. But then all of those, like, well, what are they going to think of me, and what's that going to happen, and what are the ramifications, and who else is going to be mad at me, and does that make me a bad person, and like all of those things.
My friend group.
Right. All of those things clutter the core issue of like, no, I actually get to have boundaries even when it's hard.
Yeah.
So I think that's one that's complicated. We can control it, but it's complicated.
And maybe some people feel like they can't control it.
Yeah, we feel like some of those decisions are being made for us when boundaries aren't being respected. So maybe we've put the boundary in place, but if we can't control what other people are going to do, then that means we can't control how they're going to react to that boundary.
Can't control what you think about me.
Yeah. Other people's opinions and thoughts and interpretations of who you are and what your behavior is. Yeah. That's a hard one. I heard a phrase recently, like, other people's opinions of me is not my business, right? But like, it feels like my business because it's about me, right? But it's not.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one. The past and the future.
Yeah.
The past seems very clear cut to me. Like, I can't control that.
Isn't that where anxiety lives?
Absolutely.
In the past and the future.
Yep, that's where anxiety lives. We're either anxious about things that have already happened or about what may or may not happen that's yet to come, right? Very rarely do we have anxiety about the present. We have nervousness sometimes, but actual anxiety lives in the past and the future. The future is a tricky one in terms of control too, because
Maybe some people would put it in that bucket, and some people would say it's in control. Some would say it's out of control. And I think it's going to have a lot to do with your spiritual beliefs. Do you believe there's a master plan and this is just going to have how it's going to happen? Or, I don't know. That's a loaded one.
It really is
very,
a loaded
very
one. And
loaded.
I didn't catch that the first time we talked about these things, but
me either.
But it's like there are things I can do now that I have control over that are going to change, impact, or otherwise color my future, right? And what that looks like. But
you get hit by a car.
But I could get hit by a car, and I can't
and
control
then
that.
You can't control
and
that.
It could rain tomorrow, and I can't control that.
Right,
and I don't know what the future's going to hold in terms of, society and the world and all kinds of different things.
Yeah, there could be some type of automation that you've studied for this engineering thing or whatever forever, and then there's some type of
somebody invents something.
Yeah, they invent
and it's
something.
Obsolete.
Yeah, which is ironic that maybe you're the engineer that invented it.
Whoops.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think maybe just saying the future is too broad, right? So there are elements of the future that are, and then it kind of comes down to, well, I don't know what I don't know.
Absolutely.
Because it hasn't happened yet. So maybe that's where the lack of control really falls there, I think
and the anxiety.
Yeah. And the anxiety, because we, not knowing is incredibly hard for most of us.
Yeah.
I think that's an uncomfortable place to be. We can control like our response to things, and our self-talk that goes along with that, and the words that we use and how we respond to people. That's something I do see and feel that is firmly within our control. Again, uncomfortable sometimes, but firmly within our control. Where I think that gets confusing is we can control our self-talk, but intrusive thoughts are a real thing, and that when they show up, that's something that we may or may not have control over their existence, but we can have control over what we do when they enter. Now, if that's part of some sort of a mental health disorder or challenge, we may not be able to do that on our own, right? So like OCD is a really good example that comes with intrusive thoughts. If we're having those and we're finding that we can't control those, we can, ultimately, there are tools out there, therapeutic tools, but we probably need the guidance of a therapist or a licensed counselor to sort of help us unpack that. But I think knowing that is ultimately at some point going to be within our control can be comforting on that path to healing.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, the self-talk we can control. We can introduce new things on purpose that's happening in there.
Well, a little earlier when we were, you and I were talking about this before we started this, we had talked about what we consume.
Yeah, so that's a big one. That's one I'm talking with my teenage daughter about a lot these days, right? So like what we consume, I think a lot of people have heard already, like, oh, you become like the 5 people you spend the most time around, right? That's a thing that's out there. But what about like everything we are reading and watching and listening to and viewing and social media and TikTok and all of those messages that are just getting consistently thrown at us, right? What are we consuming? And I think there's an argument there when you start talking about algorithms, about how much is in your control and how much is not. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't really, so I think algorithms, I would say they're out of your control.
Okay. See, I disagree.
I know. I was just setting you up to disagree with me. I know you disagree.
Well, and here's the thing, like when we did the research on this, algorithms did fall outside of our control. And I really took issue with that because I think that it's based on what we are consuming, right? So it's based on if I'm continuing to engage and interact and like and follow and watch certain content, then I'm going to continue to get that content back. It's a bit of a mirror. And so if I change what I'm consuming, then the algorithm is going to give me something different.
Still not controlling it.
How do you figure?
You're just not. I mean, it's creating a prediction about you, but it's going to serve you, social media through algorithms. It's going to serve you what it thinks should go to you, not what you want to see necessarily.
But I've given it all of the information. I guess that's where I'm stuck. Like if I'm baking cookies and I put all of the ingredients together, I have control over that. Now I have cookies, right?
I disagree.
How?
You might have control over your cookies because you have control over something bigger and you have control over your kitchen.
Okay.
But with algorithms, they're outside of your kitchen. So you're going to put your sugar and your, milk or whatever, chocolate chips and walnuts in your cookies, but then it's going to go outside of the kitchen that you can control, and someone's going to throw some dirt in there.
Okay.
Or they're going to throw something else in there that you don't want. You might get your cookies back and they could be dog poop cookies.
Oh, that doesn't sound good at all.
Because I took your cookies that was out of your control. You put all your ingredients, but I decided based on what you put in there, I wanted to put in raisins. And you hate raisins in your chocolate.
Okay. So that element of I'm making the assumption, right? So because you like chocolate chips, you must also like butterscotch. And now you've thrown that in my cookies. And I don't actually really like butterscotch. I didn't ask for that. I didn't control that part.
Right.
Okay. So the formulatic piece is the part that we can't control.
That's the part where I say, well, no, I don't think you're not in control of your algorithms. Because you know what? If they wanted to, say if Zuckerberg wanted to change his algorithm, he can change his algorithm tomorrow and say, if you look for shoes on the internet, we're going to serve you cars.
Okay. And then in my mind, I didn't really put that out there.
No, you didn't put that out into the universe.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
Not
right.
that he would do that. Maybe
no,
he would. I don't
but
know.
We're not the ones building the algorithms, right? I think algorithms is such an important conversation in the mental health world because it's feeding us back what we're going to consume, and those things that we're consuming on social media are induce different emotions. They involve different triggers. They make us sad. They make us happy. They make us laugh. They, all of those different things. And so I think that's an overlooked conversation in the mental health arena that I think is really, really important because, if particularly looking at TikTok, right? TikTok is the first platform that's really nailing the whole, it's cultivated to the user. So my TikTok is a completely different experience than my 14-year-old's TikTok, than your TikTok would be, right? Like it's a completely curated experience. And I think it's being sold to people as you are controlling that. So we feel that false sense of control because we're getting
served what they want to serve you.
And we're being told, well, you like this.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, particularly on a developing brain, like, oh, well, I must like this. This is cool then, right? This is funny. The conversations I'm having with my daughter is how many things do you laugh at because they show up on your feed?
Yeah.
And, she likes funny cat videos. And, like there was one that was actually kind of mean. It was bordering on like, is that animal cruelty, right? And I was like, well, why did you laugh? And she's like, I don't know. It's just like another funny cat video, right? Because I'm supposed to laugh at funny cat videos because I like funny cat videos, right? And I think we're losing our discernment because things are being sort of force-fed to us as this goes in your bucket of funny and you like this, right? So I think that's the emotional danger of algorithms as well. I like to mess with mine every now and then, like just look at something random or weird or, have you ever tried the talking in front of your phone about something over and over and over again and see if you start to get targeted ads for it?
or you go in and you start searching for certain, pocketbook or something that you like, so it'll come up in your husband's feed because you're on the same
That's
IP
brilliant.
address. Oh, for Christmas, good Christmas gifts, Coach bag, and then it starts serving it to everybody in the house.
We need to edit that part out so that no one knows that secret because that's brilliant. I love that.
I want a trip to.
Oh, I love that. But it's interesting because how much of that though, like the power of suggestion and persuasion, right? So like, there was an article that I read a while ago. There was a couple, they tried to pick like the most random thing they could possibly think of that they don't talk about ever.
Yeah.
So they did cat litter because they didn't have cats, right? So they would, and they never typed it, they never Google searched it, but consistently over and over. And it took like a week or so where they were talking about cat litter. And all of a sudden they started getting ads
litter
for cat litter and cat food, right? There's that whole I threw butterscotch in your cookies thing, cat food, right? And like if that wasn't curated by them as an experiment, like, I don't know, maybe you start thinking, should we get a cat? Maybe we should get a cat, right? So like when that's in your environment, whatever that is, that's being consistently introduced, what we're consuming, I think that has an influence on then what we think we want, how we view things that are popular, how we view things that are funny, how we view, I mean, you see that in politics too, like, as we're leaning, politically one way or the other, and we're looking at those articles and we're looking at those videos, all of a sudden that becomes all we see. And now we're not as balanced. Right.
And unfortunately, there's a group for everything out there, or there's so maybe I'm conservative, maybe you're conservative, and I'm looking at some conservative stuff, and then it starts to skew further and further.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
away,
then
and then you're starting getting, where this is like, okay, you are just literally hanging off the right end of the continuum by a pinky nail. Type stuff is coming
like
to
this
you.
got weird real quick.
Or the other side, I'm liberal, and now I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm hanging off the left side.
Absolutely.
Just hanging on by a little tiny thread.
Yeah, and then I think we're creating this. I think the danger in that, like the greater societal danger in that, is that we look a lot like in this industry and in the substance misuse industry, and we look at social norms, right? We look at like what is generally accepted and considered normal, and are those things fundamentally helping or hurting a problem, right? Well, when our social norms become individualized, right? So like your social norms may be different now than mine because of all of these curated experiences and what we're consuming, that becomes harder. It becomes harder to correct that because it starts to present as individualism, and it starts to just look like people are different and we have different, right? But then there's more and more and more division because we're getting so entrenched in what we're being fed. But again, I get the point about the part of the algorithms we can't control, but ultimately that did all begin with what we are consuming. And I think that's the lesson here.
It does. Yeah.
And that's the lesson here, I think, in terms of what we can control and what we can't, and why it's important is, being mindful of what we're consuming and how much of it we are consuming, I think is important. And beyond just like the things we kind of already know, like screen time and this and that and all that kind of stuff, but just what are we doing with that time?
Yeah.
And is it consistently the same thing? And how is that skewing what we're getting fed back?
I would say that definitely with algorithms, it gives you the illusion of control.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I think that's it right there, that there's an illusion of control. If you really think about it, but for some folks, particularly I think for young people, right? They may not have that same level of awareness of the role the algorithms are playing, right?
Yeah, they don't.
And so it just starts to look like, well, everybody's talking about this, everyone's doing this, everyone. When really the person,
and I'm always like, who's everyone?
Right?
Who is everyone? What are you?
Everyone in this little box you're holding in front of your face is doing that, but that's like the person literally sitting next to you, looking at their own little box in their face is doing something completely different. And I think increasing an awareness of that, and again, it goes back to too, like, if we are noticing that our stress levels are high, and if we are noticing, particularly with the big stuff, like, are we feeling anxious about the state of the world, right? That's a real thing. I'm not minimizing that, right? But if we're feeling overly anxious about that, or we're feeling overly anxious about larger issues or societal change or things like that, it's at least worth taking a look at. Are we getting overfed some information on that? And can we, maybe we can't control it, but we have some influence there. We can give
or
different
just being
ingredients
aware that
to the kitchen.
What's going on is going on, and being aware of that and knowing what to look out for.
Absolutely. Because I think overwhelm of anything impacts our mental and emotional health, right? So I think awareness, understanding what we can control, what we can influence. And I do think there's something comforting and a little bit freeing in knowing that some of these things, it's both. There are elements we can control and elements that we can't, and things that just feel harder than others. You know, it's not as simple as just like, well, I can't control what you think of me, therefore I'm not stressed about that anymore. No, that's not real. Like,
I want it to be.
right. Like I'm super still stressed about that. Right. But I need to at least, that's not, I think that control and not control is part of the conversation. But I think when it's the whole conversation, it oversimplifies a complex situation.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Which begs the question for me, like now if I've identified, okay, these are some things that are stressing me out. These are some things that are causing me some anxiety and I can't control them.
What do I do?
What do I do?
What do I do, Laura? I start thinking about coping strategies and how I'm going to manage those things.
Yeah, I think that's something we should talk about next time. What do you think?
I think so too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Brain Factor. Joy and I are so thrilled to be having these needed conversations. We'd love to hear your feedback on this episode, so if you could drop a comment or leave a review with your thoughts or any requests that you may have, it would be appreciated. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Living a healthier and happier life starts with one step, and we're excited to be on this journey with you. Until next time.